My name is Victoria. I'm 29 years old, and I live in Guildford, a quiet town in Surrey, where nothing much happens to anyone. Or so I thought. The courtroom corridor felt suffocating. Cold stone walls, the smell of old buildings, the kind of place where lives get officially dismantled. My hands were steady, but my heart was doing something strange, a controlled rhythm like I'd practiced it. Marcus stood close, leaning in so only I could hear. His breath smelled of expensive cologne and something bitter underneath. The lawyers couldn't hear this. The strangers filing past couldn't witness this particular cruelty. He wanted it to be mine alone, a private gift. "I'm going to take everything, Victoria," he whispered. His voice was low, calculated. "Every single thing. Today's the day you realize what it means to lose." He pulled back, letting his eyes find mine. He was smiling. That smile had once made my stomach flip with joy. Now it looked like a predator's expression. All teeth, no warmth. Behind him stood Arabella. She was younger than me, wearing a dress the color of fresh blood that seemed deliberately provocative for a place like this. She smiled too, the kind of smile that suggested she already knew how this story ended. She thought she'd won. Marcus expected tears. He expected me to crumble right there in front of the other people waiting in that corridor, the other broken marriages, the other betrayals, the other ordinary tragedies of suburban life. He thought I'd beg. He thought I'd scream. That's what guilty, broken wives did, wasn't it? I didn't say a word. I simply looked at him, held his gaze, let the silence sit between us like something solid. He interpreted that silence as fear. He thought it was the silence of a woman watching her world end. He had no idea that I'd spent the last 5 weeks preparing for this exact moment. He didn't know about the folder in my bag, thick with evidence, organized and cross-referenced. He thought he was the hunter. He didn't understand yet that he was already caught. Marcus stepped back, straightening his suit jacket. It was expensive. Savile Row tailored, probably cost more than my monthly salary. He'd bought it 3 months ago, telling me it was for an important client presentation. I knew now that the client was Arabella. Everything had been a performance. Our entire marriage, it turned out, had been theater. He looked down at me sitting on that hard wooden bench, and I realized something fundamental. He'd always made me feel small. Physically, yes. I've never been tall, but more than that. He'd spent 8 years making me feel invisible in my own life. "Lost for words, Victoria?" he asked, loud enough for nearby people to turn their heads. He wanted witnesses. He wanted them to see him as the strong one, the confident man leaving his weak wife behind. I looked up at him, meeting his gaze directly. His face was still handsome. I couldn't deny that. It was the same face I'd fallen in love with 9 years ago when we met at university. But his eyes had changed. The kindness had drained away somewhere over the last few years, replaced by something harder, something cruel. I didn't answer his question. I simply folded my hands in my lap, arranged my expression, and waited. I'd practiced this face in the bathroom mirror that morning, standing in front of the sink with the light too bright and my heart too loud. "Don't let him see you shake," I'd told my reflection. "Don't let him see what you know. Don't give him the satisfaction of your fear." Marcus laughed, a short, sharp sound like breaking glass. "Look at her," he said to Arabella, gesturing in my direction like I was a performance piece. "She's terrified. She knows exactly what's coming." Arabella made a sound that was probably meant to be sympathetic, but came out as something else entirely. A giggle, airy and bright, completely out of place in this gray, serious corridor. She looked at me the way someone looks at a pigeon on the pavement. Something beneath notice, something inconvenient. "Don't be too harsh, Marcus," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. It's a difficult day for her. She didn't mean a word of it. She just wanted the lawyers walking past to think she was kind, magnanimous, the better woman in this narrative. I saw the smirk she gave me when Marcus wasn't looking. Brief, triumphant, cruel. Around her wrist was a gold bracelet. I recognized it immediately. An 18-karat tennis bracelet studded with small diamonds that caught the light. It was the first piece of evidence I'd found, the thing that had started this entire avalanche. Seeing it on her wrist made my stomach twist, made me feel physically sick. But I didn't react. I breathed in slowly, breathed out slowly, controlled everything. His lawyer arrived then, a loud man with a shiny briefcase and the kind of confidence that comes from always winning. He shook Marcus's hand with excessive vigor. "Ready to wrap this up?" he asked. "More than ready," Marcus said, clapping him on the back with the ease of someone absolutely certain of victory. "Hazel's going to sign whatever we put in front of her. Aren't you, sweetheart?" The pet name was a weapon. He deployed it deliberately, trying to provoke me, trying to get me to react badly so he could point at me later and say, "See? She's unstable. She's emotional. She can't be trusted." I'd seen Zin like him do this before. I'd read about it. I understood the playbook. I remained silent. I kept my eyes fixed on the scuffed floor tiles, counting them like they might hold answers. My silence began to bother him. I could feel it. The way his body language shifted, the way he stopped laughing quite so quickly. He started shifting his weight from one foot to the other. He checked his watch. 3 times in less than a minute. Throughout our marriage, I'd been the reactor. When Marcus was angry, I'd apologize. When he was worried, I'd comfort him. When he was shouting, I'd lower my voice and try to calm him down. I'd built my entire identity around managing his emotions, smoothing his path, making his life easier. I was always the one responding to his moods, his needs, his demands. Now, I wasn't reacting at all. I was a stone wall. He leaned down again, his voice becoming a tight hiss. "Say something, for God's sake. Stop sitting there like a kicked dog. It's pathetic." I lifted my chin and met his eyes directly. I didn't blink. I didn't frown. I just looked at him with complete, total emptiness. "We're due in court, Marcus," I said. My voice was soft, but it was steady. It didn't waver, it didn't shake, it didn't betray anything at all. "We should probably go in." He blinked. Confusion flickered across his face. He'd expected fear. He'd expected distress. He'd expected the Victoria he knew, the one who'd spent the last 8 years making his life comfortable, keeping his secrets, ignoring the red flags. Instead, he got nothing. No reaction. No fuel for his fire. "Yeah," he muttered, straightening up. "We should." Some of the swagger had left his shoulders. He looked back at Arabella almost like he needed reassurance, needed her to confirm that everything was still going according to plan. She gave him a quick, tight smile, but there was something uneasy in her expression too. They didn't understand what was happening. They thought my silence was weakness. They believed I was frozen with terror, because they were about to take my home, my savings, my future away from me. They were catastrophically wrong. My silence wasn't fear. It was focus. It was steel. It was the sound of a mind working at full capacity while my body remained perfectly still. I was holding all the noise inside me. The anger, the hurt, the betrayal, all of it screaming inside my chest like an animal trapped in a box. But I wouldn't let it out. Not here. Not in front of him. He needed my panic to feel powerful. By giving him nothing, I was taking his power away before we even stepped into that courtroom. He just didn't realize it yet. The bailiff opened the heavy oak doors. "All parties for Bennett versus Bennett, please enter the courtroom." Marcus took a deep breath, puffed out his chest like he was preparing for battle, and walked toward the doors. Arabella followed, her heels clicking on the floor. He looked back at me one final time, and there it was, that sneer, that absolute certainty that he'd already won. I stood up slowly. I picked up my large tote bag, the one I'd packed carefully this morning. It was heavy with paper. Bank statements, property records, screenshots, receipts. The entire architectural blueprint of his lies, all neatly organized and cross-referenced. It contained the truth about our marriage. Every stolen pound. Every lie. Every betrayal. Everything. I walked behind them into the courtroom, and I was alone. An overwhelming sadness washed over me like a wave, sudden and enormous, the kind of sadness that could have drowned me right there in that hallway. This was the end of the life I'd thought I was building. This was the moment everything I'd invested in. 8 years of love, trust, sacrifice, compromise officially became a waste. But then I felt the weight of the bag in my hand. The evidence. The proof. The weapon. I wasn't just a victim walking to the slaughter. I had something of my own. I took another deep breath. pushed the sadness down somewhere it wouldn't interfere with what needed to happen, and followed my husband into the room where I was going to systematically dismantle everything he thought he'd built. To understand why Marcus thought he could destroy me, you have to understand who I was in our marriage. I've never been the loudest person in the room. Even as a child, I was the quiet one, sitting in the corner with a book, organizing my toys in neat rows, finding comfort in order. I didn't need to be the center of attention. I liked things to make sense. I liked patterns and logic, and the satisfaction of a problem solved. When I met Marcus, he was everything I wasn't. He was loud. He was funny. He had this enormous energy that seemed to fill whatever space he occupied. He walked into a party and everyone turned to look at him. He could charm anyone: waiters, strangers, business partners. He charmed me immediately. I thought we balanced each other. He provided the excitement and spontaneity, and I provided stability and structure. In the beginning, he appreciated that dynamic. He called me his rock. He said he'd be lost without me keeping his life together. He was right about that last part. Marcus was terrible with practical details. He forgot bill due dates. He double-booked appointments. He'd spend money without any consideration for tomorrow. I took over everything, and I was genuinely happy to do it. That's what I believed a good wife did. Supported her husband so he could focus on his career in sales, on being successful, on becoming whoever he wanted to be. Every Sunday night, I'd sit at the kitchen table with my laptop and a calculator. I paid the mortgage, I paid the electricity bill, the car payments, the insurance. I balanced our checking account down to the last penny. I created spreadsheets for our savings goals. We wanted to buy a bigger house one day. We talked about having children. I tracked every pound we put aside for those dreams. Marcus never looked at the spreadsheets. He never asked about the bank accounts unless he wanted to buy something, usually something expensive that we couldn't really afford, but that I'd find a way to make work anyway. "Hey, Vicky," he'd say, using the nickname he'd given me that I'd never actually liked but had learned to accept. "Can we afford a trip to Ibiza with the lads?" I'd look at the budget. I'd move things around. I'd sacrifice something I wanted: a new winter coat, a weekend getaway for just the two of us, so I could say yes to him. "Yes, Marcus, we can afford it." He'd kiss my cheek and say, "You're brilliant, babe." Then he'd go pack his bag and leave me home alone for the weekend while he got drunk on a Spanish beach. Over the years, the appreciation stopped. My work became invisible to him. He expected the bills to be paid. He expected clean clothes in the wardrobe and food in the fridge. He expected his life to run smoothly without him having to think about any of it. He started to see my quiet nature not as strength but as blandness, as boring. "You need to loosen up, Victoria," he'd say when I wanted to stay in on a Friday night after a long week at work. I had a demanding job too. I was a data analyst for a logistics firm, and it was exhausting. But somehow my exhaustion didn't count. "You're always so serious," he'd continue. "It's dull." That word hurt more than anything else he said to me. Dull? I wasn't dull. I was responsible. I was keeping our life afloat while he networked at bars until 2 in the morning. He saw himself as the great provider, because his salary was larger than mine. He liked to brag about his commissions, dropping mentions of big sales into conversation like they proved something essential about his character. "Had a stellar month, Vicky," he'd say, throwing his suit jacket over the chair I'd just tidied. "Dinner's on me tonight. Let's go somewhere posh." He didn't know, or maybe he didn't care, that his stellar month barely covered the credit card debt he'd accumulated the previous month on golf club membership fees and fancy lunches with colleagues. I moved money from our savings to cover his spending so he wouldn't feel embarrassed. I protected his ego. I made myself smaller so he could feel bigger. He mistook my competence for simple helpfulness. He thought anyone could do what I did. He saw me as his assistant, someone to handle the boring administrative stuff while he lived what he considered the real life. He forgot that I was the one who knew where every pound went. He forgot that I had the passwords to everything. He forgot that my mind worked like a calculator, remembering dates and numbers and promises with perfect clarity. He saw a mouse. He didn't see the person holding the keys to his entire existence. When he decided to leave me for Arabella, someone younger, louder, more exciting, less boring, he thought I would simply fade away. He believed that he could instruct his lawyer to offer me the minimum, and I'd accept it because I was too weak to fight. He thought the person who'd built the foundation of his life wouldn't know how to dismantle it completely. It was the biggest mistake of his life, and it all started with something so simple. A small slip-up, a moment of carelessness, the kind of thing that happens when you get too confident, too comfortable, too certain that you'll never get caught. The unraveling began on a Tuesday evening in March. It was raining hard. That cold, miserable rain that sounds angry against windows. I was in the kitchen making lasagne. It was Marcus's favorite meal. I made it from scratch, letting the sauce simmer for hours the way he liked it. I was trying. Things had been distant between us for months. He'd been working late more often. He snapped at me over small things. I was clinging to the hope that if I made his favorite dinner, maybe we could sit down and talk. Maybe we could find our way back to something resembling affection. I heard the garage door around 7 o'clock. That familiar jolt in my stomach, part anticipation, part dread. Which version of Marcus was walking through that door tonight? The one who'd be charming and warm, or the one who'd become a cold stranger? He came in through the mudroom door, shaking rain off his expensive wool coat. "Hey," he said, not looking at me. He seemed distracted, buzzing with an odd sort of energy. He wasn't angry, which was something, but he wasn't warm either. His mind was clearly somewhere else, entirely. "Hello, love," I said. "Dinner's almost ready. It's lasagne." "Sounds good," he said, but he was already moving toward the stairs. "I need a shower first. I feel rank from the travel." He'd been away for 3 days on a business trip to Manchester. Or at least, that's what he'd told me. "Don't take too long," I called after him. I turned off the oven and walked into the mudroom where he'd hung his coat. It was soaking wet. If it dried like that, it would smell musty for weeks. I took it off the hook to drape it over a chair near the radiator so it would dry properly. This was the kind of thing I did automatically. The small gestures of care that kept a household running, the invisible labor that no one noticed until it wasn't done. As I moved the coat, I felt something stiff in the inside pocket. A piece of paper. At first, I thought nothing of it. Marcus was always shoving receipts into his pockets and forgetting about them. Part of my routine was emptying his pockets before I took things to the dry cleaner, so he wouldn't lose anything important. I reached into the silky lining and pulled out the paper. It was damp from the rain. A receipt. I started to crumple it up to throw it away, but something caught my eye. The logo at the top. It wasn't for petrol or a business lunch. It was an elegant script. Cartier. I stopped. My breath caught in my throat. Cartier, Bond Street, the most exclusive jewelry store in London. Marcus had never bought me anything from there. Our wedding rings came from H. Samuel, a nice but modest chain store in the shopping center. We'd looked at more expensive options, but I'd insisted on something practical. Something we could afford. I smoothed the damp paper out on the mudroom bench. I stared at the numbers. My hands were beginning to shake, but I kept reading. The total at the bottom. £4,200, £4,200. I looked at the item description. 18-karat gold diamond tennis bracelet. $3,950. A bracelet. I looked down at my own wrist. It was bare except for my practical watch. Maybe it was for me. Our anniversary was coming up in 3 months. Maybe he was planning ahead. But Marcus never planned ahead. He was a last-minute shopper, usually buying me a gift card on the actual day of the anniversary. Then my eyes moved to the top of the receipt. The date and time. March 17 time. 1:45 p.m. location. Cartier, Bond Street. London, March 17th was yesterday. Yesterday at 1:45 in the afternoon, while he was supposedly in meetings in Manchester all day, Marcus was on Bond Street in London buying an expensive bracelet. The world seemed to tilt. Everything suddenly felt unstable. If he was in Manchester, how was he buying jewelry in London during his lunch break? The smell of lasagne from the kitchen suddenly made me feel sick. The sound of the shower running upstairs felt distant, unreal. Everything I thought I knew about my life fractured in that moment. Not a catastrophic break, but a hairline fracture, thin and sharp, the kind you can sometimes ignore until the pressure builds. I wasn't sad yet. I was in shock. My logical brain, the organized, analytical part of me, was trying to find a reason, a rational explanation. Maybe the receipt date was wrong. Maybe he'd ordered it online and this was just the confirmation. But deep down, in the part of me that had learned to read between the lines of his behavior, I knew the truth. He wasn't in Manchester. He was here. And he was buying expensive jewelry that wasn't for me. I heard the water turn off upstairs. He'd be coming down soon, smelling like soap and shampoo, expecting his favorite dinner, ready to sit across from me and lie about his day in Manchester. I folded the receipt carefully and put it in the pocket of my jeans instead of his. It felt hot against my thigh, like it was burning through the fabric. I walked back into the kitchen feeling numb, like I was watching myself from outside my body. I served the lasagne. I sat down across from Marcus, and I asked him the question, already knowing the answer. How were the meetings in Manchester? My voice sounded normal. It amazed me that my voice could sound normal when my entire world was coming apart at the seams. He took a big bite of lasagne. Grueling, he said with a sigh. Those clients are difficult. We were stuck in a conference room for 10 hours yesterday. I barely saw daylight. He looked me right in the eyes when he said it. The lie came so easily to him. It was terrifying. I realized in that moment that I didn't know this man. Or rather, I knew him. But he wasn't who I thought he was. I looked at him, really looked at him. I saw the man I'd loved, and I saw a stranger. Someone capable of this kind of deception. That receipt in my pocket was the first crack. And now that I knew it was there, I knew the entire foundation was about to crumble. Dinner felt like agony. Every word Marcus spoke felt like another lie piling up on the table between us. I pushed my food around my plate. My stomach was twisted into knots. "You're not hungry?" he asked, helping himself to a second portion. "Just tired," I said quietly. He didn't push it. He didn't really care. He talked about work, about the imaginary Manchester trip, adding details that I now knew were complete fiction. He talked about bad coffee in the conference room and how tired he was of traveling. I listened. I nodded. I played the role of the supportive wife, all while feeling like I was drowning. Inside, though, something was shifting. A cold, hard clarity was taking over. I needed to know everything. I needed proof. The receipt was a smoking gun, but I needed to understand the full scope of what he'd done. After dinner, he went into the living room to watch a football match. "I need to zone out for a bit," he said. "I've got some work to catch up on," I said. It was the perfect excuse. He never questioned me working on my laptop. I had a demanding job. It made sense that I'd bring work home. I went into our home office and closed the door. I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. My hands were steady now. The shock had worn off, replaced by a grim determination. I didn't log into my work email. I opened a private browser window. I started with Facebook. Marcus wasn't very active there. Mostly just family photos and old university friends. I scrolled through his recent activity. Nothing unusual. No new friends, no suspicious comments. I moved to Instagram. Marcus used this more frequently. He followed athletes, car accounts, people he'd met through work. I went to his profile and looked at who he was following. There were hundreds of accounts. I started scrolling through the list, looking for anything that stood out. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for. A name, a face, something that would confirm what I already knew. I scrolled past the usual accounts, male names, business associates, gym colleagues. And then near the top of his recently followed list, I saw it Arabella G Designs. The profile picture was tiny, but I could see blonde hair and a bright smile. My heart gave a painful thud. I clicked on the name. Her profile was public. She wanted to be seen. Her bio read, "Interior stylist, London-based, lover of beautiful things." I started scrolling through her photos. She was beautiful. I had to give her that. She had the kind of effortless beauty that suggested she'd never had to worry about money or security or any of the practical concerns that had consumed my adult life. She had photos of expensive coffees, designer shoes, Aesthetically pleasing hotel lobbies. The kind of lifestyle that seemed designed for Instagram, where beauty and luxury were the only things that mattered. I scrolled back to yesterday, March 17th. There it was. A photo posted around 6:45 p.m. It was a close-up of her hand holding a glass of champagne. The background was blurry, but it looked like a fancy hotel bar, the kind with velvet chairs and soft lighting. On her wrist was a bracelet, an 18-karat gold tennis bracelet with small glittering diamonds. It caught the light perfectly. Brand new. I leaned closer to the screen, my eyes burning. It was the bracelet from the receipt. The £3, 950 bracelet Marcus had bought while he was supposed to be in Manchester. The caption read, "Champagne moments and sparkly new things, spoiled by the best man, blessed date night luxury." I felt physical sickness rise in my throat. I had to swallow hard to keep from gagging. This wasn't just a fling. This wasn't a one-night mistake on a lonely business trip. He was dating her. He was taking her out on date nights in our own city while I sat at home making his favorite dinner and worrying about his stressful week. I read the comments. Her friends were gushing. "OMG, Arabella, it's gorgeous. Who's the mysterious man?" Arabella had replied with winking emojis and heart emojis. She was loving the attention. I scrolled through her feed, and suddenly everything made sense. I saw a photo from 2 weeks ago of 2 dinner plates at an expensive steakhouse, Marcus's favorite restaurant. A picture from a month ago of the interior of a luxury car that looked exactly like Marcus's Range Rover. The pieces clicked together with horrible clarity. This had been going on for weeks, maybe months. While I was balancing our budget and moving money around to pay off his credit cards, he was spending thousands on this girl. I didn't cry. I sat there in the quiet office, the blue light of the laptop screen illuminating my face, and I felt absolutely nothing but cold, hard reality. The grief would come later. I knew that. The heartbreak would try to drown me. But right now, I was in survival mode. The organized part of my brain took over completely. I didn't close the tab. I started taking screenshots. I captured the photo of the bracelet. I captured the caption. I captured the date and time. I went back and screenshotted the dinner photos, the car photo, everything that proved this wasn't innocent. I saved everything into a new folder on my desktop. I named it simply Proof. I had the receipt in my pocket. I had the photos on my computer. It was confirmed. My marriage was built on lies. I closed the laptop. I stood up and walked out of the office. I walked into the living room. Marcus was laughing at something on the television. He looked relaxed, happy, completely unaware that his entire world had just shifted. "Done with work?" he asked, not looking away from the screen. "Yes," I said. "I'm done." He didn't hear the double meaning. "I'm going up to bed," I said. "Okay, babe. I'll be up soon." I walked up the stairs to the bedroom we'd shared for 8 years. I went into the wardrobe and looked at his clothes, at the life we'd supposedly built together. It was all contaminated now. Every memory felt dirty. I changed into my pajamas and lay down on my side of the bed. I stared at the ceiling in the dark. I knew what I had to do. I couldn't confront him yet. If I confronted him now, with just a receipt and some Instagram photos, he'd lie. He'd gaslight me. He'd tell me I was paranoid, that I was crazy. He'd hide his tracks better. He'd cover his evidence. I needed more. I needed to know how deep this went. I needed to know how much of our money he'd spent on her. I needed proof so overwhelming, so undeniable, that when the time came, it would destroy him. Kevin thought I was weak. He thought I was stupid. He was about to discover just how dangerous a quiet, organized woman could be. I closed my eyes, but I didn't sleep. I began to plan. The next morning, Marcus left for work as usual. He kissed my cheek and told me he had a busy day ahead. I smiled and told him to drive safely. It was the first lie I'd told him in 8 years of marriage. It felt surprisingly easy. As soon as his car pulled out of the driveway, I went to work. Not my actual job, but far more important work. I called my office and said I was ill. It wasn't a lie, not really. I felt sick. My entire life was crashing down, and I couldn't pretend to focus on data analysis and logistics reports. I sat at the kitchen table with a pot of coffee and my laptop. I opened a new spreadsheet. I named the file simply Balance. I had always been the one to handle the finances. Marcus preferred it that way because he was lazy. He didn't want to think about bills or savings. He just wanted to swipe his card and have it work. Because of this, I had access to everything: passwords, PIN numbers, account history. It was all stored in my secure drive or locked away in my memory. I started with the joint checking account, the account where our salaries went. It was supposed to be for household expenses: the mortgage, groceries, utilities, all the boring, essential stuff that kept our life running. I pulled the statements for the last 12 months and went through them line by line. I found the obvious things first: cash withdrawals, £150 here, £200 there. It started small about 6 months ago. Then the amounts got bigger. Then I saw the transfers. There were transfers to an account I didn't recognize. They were labeled consulting in the notes section. Marcus wasn't a consultant. He was a sales director. There was no consulting business. I traced the account number. It was an online bank, the kind that's easy to set up anonymously, the kind people used when they wanted to hide money. I used Marcus's national insurance number, which I knew by heart, to reset the password for that online bank account. I logged in. It wasn't a business account. It was a slush fund. He'd been systematically moving money from our joint savings, money we were supposed to be saving for a bigger house, for a future family, into this private account. And from there, the money flowed out like water. I saw transactions for Arabella G Designs. He was paying her directly. Venmo payments labeled rent help and car payment. My stomach turned over. He wasn't just buying her dinner. He was supporting her. He was paying for her apartment while I was looking for coupons to save money on groceries. I entered every stolen pound into my spreadsheet. October 4. 950 transfer to external account. October 12. £280 steakhouse dinner. Arabella's birthday, October 15. 675 weekend hotel stay. Claimed business trip. The numbers added up with horrifying speed. In just 6 months, he'd drained nearly £22,000 from our shared life. But then I found something even worse. I looked at our investment account. This was the account where I'd put my inheritance. My grandmother had left me £45,000 when she passed away 4 years ago. I'd told Marcus it was our safety net, a rainy day fund, something sacred. I logged in. The balance was 0. I stared at the screen. I refreshed the page, hoping it was a glitch. Balance. I clicked on the transaction history. 3 months ago, there was a withdrawal for the full amount, £45,000. Where did it go? I traced it. It went to a conveyancer. He'd used my grandmother's money, money she'd saved her entire life to give me, to put a down payment on a penthouse flat. I searched the property records. The owner was listed as Marcus Bennett. He'd bought a penthouse with my inheritance. For him and Arabella. He didn't put her name on the deed, which was smart for him legally, but he used my money to buy a flat where they could play house together while I was at home, managing his life, keeping our family afloat. I sat back in my chair. The house was silent around me. My hands were shaking, but my mind was perfectly clear. This wasn't just infidelity. This wasn't just betrayal. This was theft. This was financial abuse. He'd looked me in the eye every single day for 3 months, knowing that he'd stolen my inheritance, knowing that he'd violated the one thing I'd asked him to protect. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the coffee mug against the wall. I didn't let myself feel anything except cold clarity. I just typed, August 20. £45,000 unauthorized withdrawal. Down payment on penthouse, Chelsea Embankment. I documented everything. I downloaded every statement. I printed every transaction. I built a paper trail so detailed, so thorough, so meticulously organized that he would never be able to deny it. Not in court, not to a judge, not to anyone. By the time the sun went down, I had a complete picture of his betrayal. Every lie, every theft, every broken promise. It was all there, organized in my spreadsheet, backed up in multiple places, stored securely where he could never find it. He thought he was clever. He thought I was just the boring wife who paid the electric bill and kept the house running. He forgot that I was a professional data analyst. He forgot that numbers are my language, and the numbers were telling a story that was going to destroy him. For the next 5 weeks, I lived a double life. To Marcus, I was the same Victoria as always. I cooked his dinner. I washed his clothes. I listened to him complain about his boss. I even asked him about his business trips with a smile, nodding while he lied to my face about Manchester and conferences and difficult clients. It was exhausting. Every time he touched me, I wanted to flinch. Every time he called me babe, I wanted to be sick. But I had to be patient. I had to wait for the right moment. One night, we were in the kitchen. He was looking at his phone, smiling at a text message. I knew it was from Arabella. "Who's that?" I asked casually, wiping down the counter. He jumped. "Oh, just Dave from the office, sending a stupid meme." I said, turning away so he couldn't see my eyes. They were cold. Empty. I was gathering the final pieces of the puzzle. I needed to know about his debts. I knew Marcus liked to gamble occasionally. He used to go to gaming clubs with his friends maybe twice a year. But as I went deeper into the credit card statements, I found charges for online betting sites. Betfair, William Hill, Sky Bet. He was losing money, lots of it. He was chasing his losses. When he lost £850, he'd bet won £700 to try and win it back. He was spiraling. That explained why he'd stolen my inheritance. He wasn't just funding Arabella. He was covering his own mess. He was desperate. I added this to my spreadsheet, gambling losses year to date. 16,750. I also discovered he hadn't paid the mortgage on our house for 3 months. He'd intercepted the post so I wouldn't see the late notices. He'd told me he was handling everything online. He was setting me up to lose everything. If I hadn't discovered this, we would have gone into foreclosure while he moved into his penthouse with Arabella. The betrayal was total. He wasn't just leaving me. He was trying to destroy me on his way out. This realization killed the last bit of love I had for him. There was no sadness left, only a cold, hard need for justice. I started making moves of my own. I opened a new bank account at a different bank, somewhere he didn't know about. I redirected my salary there immediately. I contacted the credit card companies and removed my name from the joint cards. I froze my credit so he couldn't open any new loans in my name. I made copies of his passport, his driver's license, his national insurance card. I took photos of the expensive watches he'd bought with our money. I cataloged every asset we owned. I did all of this while he slept next to me, snoring peacefully, dreaming of his new life with Arabella. He thought he was the main character of this story. He thought I was just background, an extra, someone who would fade away once he was done with me. He didn't know that the background character was rewriting the entire script. By the end of the 5th week, I was ready. I had the file. I had the evidence. I had the rage packed down into a tight, heavy ball in my chest, and I had a plan. It was time to get a lawyer. I didn't pick a lawyer from an advertisement or a recommendation from a friend. I did my research properly. I searched for a solicitor who specialized in financial fraud, someone who understood complex asset division and financial abuse. I found Christopher Ashford. His office was in Gray's Inn in legal London. It wasn't flashy or impressive. It was quiet, lined with old books and the smell of coffee. Christopher was an older man, probably in his 60s, with wire-rimmed glasses and a calm voice. He didn't look like a shark. He looked more like a professor. Someone who lived in books and logic. That was exactly what I needed. I sat in his office and placed my binder on his desk. It was 3 inches thick. "What is this?" Christopher asked. "Everything," I said. "Bank statements, property records, proof of adultery, proof of theft, proof of gambling debts and hidden assets, everything." Christopher opened the binder. He began flipping through the pages carefully, adjusting his glasses, reading for 10 minutes without saying a word. When he finally looked up, there was a glimmer of respect in his eyes. "You did all of this yourself?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "Victoria," he said, leaning back in his chair, "most people come in here crying, with no idea what their spouse owns or owes. You've done 90% of my job already. I want everything back," I told him. "I don't care about the marriage. He can have the divorce. But I want my grandmother's money back. I want the house. I want him to pay for what he stole." Christopher nodded. "We can do that, but we need to be strategic." "Smart? What do you suggest?" We let him think he's winning, Christopher said. He explained the plan. It was called sandbagging. We'd file for divorce, but we'd keep the petition vague. We wouldn't mention the fraud yet. We wouldn't mention the penthouse or Arabella. We'd let Marcus think I was just a heartbroken woman who wanted out. Let him get confident, Christopher said. Let him come to the settlement conference thinking he can bully you into a terrible deal. If he thinks you know nothing about his assets, he'll be sloppy. He'll lie on his financial disclosure forms. He'll hide things. And once he lies to the court under oath, then we drop this, I said, touching the binder. Then the judge destroys him, Christopher said simply. I liked this plan. It fit me. It was quiet. It was precise. It relied on logic and evidence instead of emotion. Do it, I said. 2 days later, Marcus was served with divorce papers at his office. He came home storming. He slammed the door so hard the windows rattled. What the hell is this? He screamed, waving the papers in my face. I was sitting on the sofa reading a book. I marked my page carefully before looking up at him. It's a divorce, Marcus, I said calmly. I know about Arabella. I kept it simple. I didn't mention the money. I didn't mention the penthouse. I didn't give him any information that might make him more careful. He stopped yelling. He looked surprised, then relieved. He actually laughed. Oh, you know. Well, that makes this easier, he said, sitting down in the armchair and crossing his legs. The arrogance came right back. Look, I was going to tell you anyway, Arabella and we're in love. She understands me. We have a connection I never had with you. Okay, I said. I'm not going to be the bad guy here, he said, leaning forward. But let's be realistic. You can't afford this house on your own. I've been carrying us for years. It took every ounce of control I had not to laugh in his face. Carrying us. He hadn't paid the mortgage in 3 months. I have a lawyer, he continued. A proper shark. If you try to fight me, Victoria, I will crush you. I'll make sure you walk away with nothing. So just sign what I give you and we can end this quickly. I have a lawyer too, I said softly, he sneered. Who? Some high street solicitor? Just a lawyer, I said. Fine, he said, standing up. Do it the hard way. But don't come crying to me when you're living in a studio flat in Zone 3. He went upstairs to pack a bag. He moved out that night. He went straight to the penthouse, the one he'd bought with my inheritance. I locked the door behind him. I slid the deadbolt into place. The game was on. The day of the final hearing arrived, and this brings us back to that moment in the courtroom corridor. Marcus whispering poison in my ear. Arabella in her red dress thinking she'd already won. The promise that he would take everything. We walked into the courtroom. It was quiet and cold, formal in that distinctly British way. The judge, Justice Margaret Thornton, sat high on the bench. She was a stern woman, the kind who'd seen everything, who couldn't be impressed or manipulated. Marcus's lawyer, the loud man with the shiny briefcase, stood up first. Your Honor, he boomed, my client, Mr. Bennett, has been the sole provider in this marriage. He is requesting the sale of the marital home. He is prepared to offer Mrs. Bennett a small settlement, though we deny any request for alimony. The marriage has simply run its course. Marcus sat there nodding, looking smug. He'd submitted his financial disclosure form. On it, he listed his assets, the house, the car. That was it. He did not list the penthouse. He did not list the online bank account. He did not list the gambling debts. He'd lied under oath, just like Christopher said he would. Justice Thornton looked at Christopher. Mr. Ashford, does your client agree to these terms? Christopher stood up slowly. He adjusted his glasses. No, Your Honor, we do not. Marcus rolled his eyes. Arabella sighed loudly from the gallery. We believe Mr. Bennett's financial disclosure is incomplete, Christopher said politely. Incomplete? Marcus's lawyer scoffed. My client has been fully transparent. If I may, Christopher said. He picked up the heavy binder. He walked to the front of the courtroom. He handed one copy to the judge and one copy to Marcus's lawyer. Exhibit A, Christopher said. Bank records showing the transfer of £45 of Mrs. Bennett's separate inheritance money into an account solely controlled by Mr. Bennett. Marcus froze. He stopped slouching. He sat up very straight. Exhibit B, Christopher continued. Property records for a penthouse at Chelsea Embankment perched in Mr. Bennett's name using those stolen funds. This asset was not disclosed on his financial affidavit. The room went silent. The judge flipped through the pages. Her face grew dark. "Exhibit C," Christopher said, his voice getting harder. Credit card statements showing over £20,000 spent on luxury items, travel, and payments to a Miss Arabella Greer. Christopher gestured to Arabella in the gallery. Everyone turned to look at her. She shrank down in her seat, her face turning bright red. "And finally, Exhibit D," Christopher said. "Records of £16, 750 in gambling losses funded by marital assets. All of this documented and verified." Kevin was pale now. He looked like he was going to be sick. He looked at his lawyer, but his lawyer was reading through the binder with an expression of complete horror. His lawyer realized his client had lied to him too. "Mr. Bennett," Justice Thornton said. Her voice was like ice. "Is this true?" Marcus stammered. I can explain. I was going to pay it back." "You swore under oath that you disclosed all your assets," the judge snapped. "You committed perjury in my courtroom." Marcus's lawyer tried to stand up. "Sit down," the judge ordered. She looked at Marcus with contempt. "You have dissipated marital assets to fund an affair and a gambling addiction. You have stolen from your wife's inheritance, and you have lied to this court." Marcus looked at me. For the first time, he really saw me. He didn't see the weak, boring wife anymore. He saw the woman who had documented every single lie. He saw the precision. He saw the competence. He saw that he had lost. I looked back at him. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just watched him crumble. "I am invalidating your previous settlement offer," Justice Thornton said. "I am ruling that the penthouse at Chelsea Embankment is marital property to be awarded immediately to Mrs. Bennett to repay the stolen inheritance. The marital home will be awarded to Mrs. Bennett. Mr. Bennett, you will assume full responsibility for all gambling debts and credit card debts in your name alone." Marcus's mouth fell open. "But that's everything. I'll have nothing. I'll have nowhere to go." "You should have thought of that before you stole from your wife," the judge said coldly. The gavel came down. The sound was like a bell, like freedom, like justice finally arriving. Marcus sat in his chair, stunned, destroyed. He had no house, he had no penthouse, he had massive debt and no way out. I stood up and gathered my things. I walked past his table. "Victoria," he whispered. He sounded desperate. "Victoria, please. We can talk about this. I don't have anywhere to go." I stopped. I looked at him one final time. "You're a provider, Marcus," I said calmly. "I'm sure you'll figure it out." I walked out of the courtroom. In the corridor, Arabella was waiting. She wasn't smiling anymore. She looked furious. "You took the penthouse?" she hissed at me. "It was bought with my grandmother's money," I said. "It was never yours." Her eyes widened. I could see the calculation happening in her mind, the realization that the money was gone, that Marcus had nothing left to offer her. "Marcus is completely broke, by the way," I continued. "About 35,750 in debt and no assets. Good luck with that relationship." Arabella's eyes went wide. She looked back toward the courtroom where Marcus was still sitting. Then she looked at the exit. She didn't wait for him. She turned on her expensive heels and walked out of the courthouse without looking back. She was done. The money was gone, so she was gone. I walked out of the courthouse alone. The sun was shining. The air felt fresh and clean. I walked to my car, got in, and sat in the driver's seat with my hands on the steering wheel. I thought I would cry. I thought I would feel a massive release of emotion, some kind of cathartic breakdown. But instead, I just felt light. The weight of the last 8 years, managing Marcus's life, hiding his flaws, making myself small so he could feel big, protecting his ego while he destroyed our marriage. It was all gone. I had my house. I had my grandmother's money back in the form of a penthouse I could sell. I had my dignity. I had myself back. I drove home. My house was quiet. It was mine. I went into the kitchen and made myself a cup of tea. I sat at the table where I'd spent years paying bills and organizing spreadsheets. I opened my laptop. I opened the file named Balance. I looked at the final column. It showed a positive net worth. It showed freedom. I closed the file and dragged it to the trash bin. I emptied the trash. I didn't need to track the lies anymore. The account was settled. The truth had won. I took a sip of tea and looked out the window at the garden. It had been neglected for a long time, just like everything else in my life. But now I had time, I had resources. I could grow whatever I wanted. Marcus wanted to take everything from me. In the end, he only took the burden of being his wife, and he gave me back myself. That was the best trade I could have ever made.